Hello, cadets. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Academy. You've got Johnny and John today. We are going to be talking kind of just loose discussion on some of our favorite trade targets for the end of the year, some players, our stances on them, maybe whether they're a buy or a sell, and some of our takeaways through week 7 of the season. So, um, I'll get into it. Or John, if you have any qualms with me kind of just getting into it and talking through my first guy that I think people should be looking to trade for, that maybe is a sneaky um, undervalued player to some that could really benefit some people.
Yeah, man, fire it away. I'm here. I'm right here on your shoulder. So let's get it started.
Okay, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts will be. So this one, I feel like this guy's been labeled a jag. He, I think, was a third round pick out of Tennessee. Was never really too crazy, but I think if you've watched him, he's come on really well and he's played really well whenever Mike Williams missed time, and that's Josh Palmer. Once Mike Williams went down, he really did step into that number two role. And I think there's fantasy managers still struggling to grasp that with Quentin Johnson being in the mix. But he clearly knows the system and is clearly in favor of Justin Herbert. He's had 7+ targets in 4 straight games. He had a 97 and 98% snap share the past 2 games, which is actually more than their true number one, Keenan Allen. So they really like this guy. They want him on the field, and he's been productive. He had 18 points last week. 2 weeks ago, he had a touchdown and one or two other holding calls, stuff like that, called back in the Dallas game. And it would just be a totally different conversation than we're having right now. You'd be like, duh, Johnny, everybody should be trading for this guy. If he had put up those points that he kind of got stolen from him in that Dallas game, but looked really well, played really well last week, looked quick, was getting separation, had strong hands. And I think people still just haven't wrapped their minds around that he could be that Mike Williams type of asset for you, like almost a set it and forget it wide receiver to the rest of the year. I don't think that's what you should give up to get him, but I think you should offer a flex player, maybe a bench quarterback, and see if someone's willing to make a deal with you to get Josh Palmer, because I think he can go in lineups and plug in and actually score some points for you. So that's my guy. What do you think, John?
So yeah, just to translate what you're saying, maybe people are missing it. You're basically saying that, Josh Palmer he's not gonna step in and be Mike Williams, not this big body guy that's gonna go up and get, catch 10 plus touchdowns a game. You're talking about production wise, this guy could be lock and loaded as a wide receiver two for your team, potentially for the rest of the season. So I don't want anyone confused out there. We're not saying Josh Palmer is Mike Williams. He doesn't have the skill set of Mike Williams. But one guy on this team that we thought would translate to the Mike Williams role was Quentin Johnston, and that hasn't happened. And I'm not really sure if that's going to happen this year. And Palmer looks like he's definitely translating into this offense a lot more with Williams stepping out of the picture. So yes, I do think Palmer you can get like relatively cheap. This is a guy that was potentially on waivers in most of your leagues and 10 teams and 12 team leagues. He's not going to cost much to really get at this point. I don't think even managers that have him probably don't really know how much his value could possibly be in this offense. I mean, with you have Herbert at the helms here. He could potentially throw for 40 touchdowns this year, 40 plus. But now, with that being said, what I would give up for him, yeah, I think Johnny's right. Maybe like a backup QB. There are injuries out there. Josh Palmer. I mean, I would even think about giving up like a tight end like Waller for Palmer at this point. I mean, Waller's going to be on a pathetic offense. He did crush it last week, which is great, but that Giants offense is going to look miserable. I'd rather take the upside on somebody that's going to be on a better offense, and that's Josh Palmer. So I like your take. I think Palmer is definitely a buy candidate, and you can get him relatively cheap.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think this is a sneaky one, right? And a guy whose value could increase as the season goes on or as people kind of come to light on it. Um, I don't know if I would give up Waller unless I was stacked at tight end, right? But like I will say, God, he looked so much better with Tyrod throwing to him against a terrible Commanders team last week, and I don't expect that to continue long term with Danny Jones getting back out there. Like, I mean, I really that is just so sad that they paid that guy so much money, and he just clearly does not look like he's as good as Tyrod Taylor throwing the football. I, I you have to play him, but you almost wish you could just starting Tyrod Taylor if you were the Brian Daboll and the Giants.
I'm right there with you. I would love to see. I'm actually a big Tyrod guy, but we're getting little off topic. But yeah, Daniel Jones, if healthy, is going to be on this team. And for whatever reason, when Daniel Jones is under center, he doesn't want to throw the ball to Waller. So don't get it. But hey, I'm not in the Giants front office. So
I like my nickname for Tyrod Taylor. I don't know if this is already a thing. I call him T-Mobile because he's mobile.
that was a dad
All right,
joke.
so yeah, probably that does probably qualify as a dad joke. What about you, man? Anybody that you think people should be like maybe sending an offer to, some feelers out for that could be a good value for them to add to their team and put in their lineups the rest of the season?
Yeah, man, and one guy that's kind of like gone under the radar, especially in PPR, I would say, is Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, he is currently the running back 8 on the season in PPR leagues, which is uh, I didn't even know that until I checked it today. I had no idea because he's been steady. He really hasn't given you that giant blow up 30-point game. He's given you the 14, the 16, the 17, almost on every week. I think week 1 he had a pretty mediocre week. But other than that, I mean, he's been rolling and he has been catching the ball out of the backfield. That was one of his biggest knocks this year when he was getting drafted in, I would say, the 7th, 8th round in drafts, that he wasn't going to catch the ball out of the backfield. Well, that's happening this year. He's probably on pace to probably shatter what I believe he caught only a handful of balls last year. So he's already outpaced what he caught out of the ball out of the season from week 7
He's
right
already
now.
caught more, almost twice as many catches as last year
Yeah. So
through 7 games.
yeah, I thought Jarek McKinnon would fit into that role of catching the ball out of the backfield, but apparently they're not even worried about that. Isaiah Pacheco seems to be getting some of that work as well. He's obviously explosive. He's fun to watch, and the fantasy production's there. And most of all, he's getting the looks and the touches. So why not? And I think this goes unnoticed. He's about to play the Broncos this week. If you don't pick him up now, this could be his explosive game this year. If he drops 30 points, his price just went up. So if you're gonna get Isaiah Pacheco, I think you get him now, and I think you get him before he goes against the Chargers and the Broncos because their defenses are not up to par this year. So
Yeah, he's got such a fantasy friendly schedule going forward. Denver, Miami, Las Vegas, Green Bay, Buffalo, Las Vegas again, all teams that are just really struggle to stop the run. To your point, that's probably the one thing that would give a manager pause is he's got to be the start of the week, right? Like you're firing any running back up with a pulse against that Broncos defense, and so you might have to pay up for him almost a little bit this week because someone might be like, "Oh, I don't," but I agree with you. You wouldn't imagine he's an RB1, but he is on the year. So he should be treated like so, and he shouldn't be. He is a value right now for sure. So love the call. We only had a couple guys that we really did deep dives on. One of the ones that I wanted to also bring up that I think is kind of interesting is like Puka is more of a buy than he is a sell. And everybody knows Puka. Everybody knows the story by now. But the thing is, he's still being hated on a little bit because Cooper Cup's in that offense, because he's a 5th round pick. But I mean, when you look at the production and the fact that since Cup's came back, he's basically been 1A still. I mean,
hmm
not quite in terms of target share, but in terms of fantasy production, it's been just as good. And um, I think that's a trend that can really continue when you look at how well he is playing. And I heard someone say, imagine if this was Jackson Smith and Jigba through 6 weeks, right? He would be an untouchable asset. He would be probably the number one piece in fantasy football because he's a rookie who's extremely productive right out of the gate like this. So just because he wasn't as highly touted of a prospect, I think there's a bit of foggy glasses on about will this guy continue to produce through the rest of the season, and not someone I would sell unless you're getting someone in the Jamar Chase, Cooper Cup conversation of a first round fantasy. That's how I've you just can't let him go with what he's pacing to do this year and the fact that he's given no signs of slowing down. So just an interesting guy that I thought, yeah, there's been a ton of craze on him, but he still might be more of a buy candidate than a sell.
Also, here's this, right? Everyone was so worried. Oh, we got to sell Puka. Cup's coming back. Cup's coming back. Guess what? Cup came back. And now the question is not if the production is going to be taken away from Puka, it's whether the production is going to be taken away from Cup. Because as we saw last week, Puka's still getting the ball. Stafford is still hammering him with targets. Now, maybe not to the extraordinary event of 17 targets per week, but he is still production. He is still a great asset for your fantasy team. So, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think it should not go unnoticed that Puka is taken away from Cup. Cup is not taken away from Puka. So,
Yeah. Such just playing incredible football, playing a high snap share, just a great trust, great eye test passing. The one knock I had on him, I did a lot of deep dives for Dynasty football in terms
speed.
of wide receiver prospects. And my one, yeah, well, speed, but you can overlook speed. But what really I can never overlook is like availability, right? Like my best ability in football is availability for my players. And I want guys who show up and don't deal with too many injuries or have a sign of being tough and be able to finish games, play through injuries. He was oft injured in college. He was even battling an oblique injury earlier this year, but I think that started to show some strides to me of like, okay, he's getting banged up. Yeah, of course he is. He's getting 20 targets in a game. But he was getting out there the next game and looking the exact same, didn't look slowed by injury. So I think he's started to kind of subside that fear for me a little bit, but that is still one of my big kind of cautions with him is like he does have a propensity to get injured. And you say you can't predict injury, but it's like you kind of can if the guy's getting injured more frequently than everyone else consistently. So,
Tell that about
uh,
Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed was hurt his entire career. We predicted it
right.
every single year.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson, right? I was banging the table that this guy was a lock. Not,
You
it was
did.
actually our hot take that he was finished outside the top 20. But I mean, I hate to victory lap it, but the reason was when I said my reason, it was this guy gets banged up and he is not available. And if you're not on the field, you're not scoring fantasy points, right? So, uh, Puka on the field, scoring fantasy points, and it's a great thing to see. I think maybe any other like bonus buys,
I'll
or
give
do
you a
you want to move
sell.
into maybe?
I want to give you a
Yeah,
sell.
let's move into sales. Yeah, give me one.
Yeah, so this may come at no surprise because I sold him in one of our leagues, Johnny. I sold Raheem Mostert, and
Oh yeah,
listen, he's been playing fantastic, but most of his production is really coming from touchdowns. He's scoring touchdowns left and right. Now, he did have one of his worst weeks on the season last week against the Eagles, but I'm telling you to sell him because one, this guy does get banged up pretty much all the time.
another guy.
He's 31 years old.
Never played like a complete season, I don't
So
think.
let me show you the red flags. I'm gonna paint you a picture. You got a 31-year-old running back. He's number 2 in fantasy football right now. Okay, 31 years old. He gets banged up all the time. Okay, one red flag. He right now is actually he's a non-participant in Wednesday practice, so he might not actually play this week. But moving on to that, we have I'm sorry, I keep Achan, Devon Achan. Yeah, well, that guy looks like a superstar, and right now he's not playing, but he will be playing at some point during this season. And when he does, that's going to eat into Mostert's production. He's going to be eating at his touches. So we're talking about a shared backfield. We're talking about most of his production came off fantasy touchdowns, and we're also talking about him being 31 years old and constantly banged up for his entire career. He's not banged up because
Yeah,
he's 31 years old. He's banged up because he's a running back in the NFL and he hasn't really put a healthy season together in a long time. Now, granted to him, it's week 8, he's still standing, but at some point or another, he's not. And he's number 2. You can get something pretty good for him right now. I actually traded I got Tua, and it's a kind of a weird trade because it's a QB, and maybe their value is a little weird when we're comparing it to running backs, but I got Tua, and I think Tua is at least a top 10 QB in fantasy football right now. So you could probably
Yeah,
get
you
something
got to
even you can get something better out there right now. I did that in like week 3 or 4, and most are still rolling. So I mean, you could probably get someone like Puka for him. You could get a Puka. You could probably get who's pretty down. I mean, you could even get Garrett Wilson. I mean,
Mhm.
I would do it. I would take a Garrett Wilson over Mostert because I don't believe that he's going to stay healthy all year. So
Right.
that's my take for it.
I like it. I like it a lot. I'm a big Mostert sell guy. I will say, like, I actually really like watching him run the football. He's very fast, very athletic, talented player with the ball in his hands. I've always been a fan. I've been burned by this guy year after year in fantasy football. So I agree with you. Like, he's someone I basically had on my do not draft list this year, and I'm glad to be wrong about it. Like I said, I like watching the guy. Um, but I think this is just a sell high candidate in its best form, right? Like um the schedule going forward toughens up a little bit. He still has his bye in front of him, so you're not even going to have him for a week. He's got the Jets, he's got the Tennessee Titans who are great against the run. He's got the Jets again in the fantasy football playoffs, Dallas in the fantasy playoffs. So uh
Baltimore in your
you know
championship.
yeah, don't Baltimore's been kind of porous against the run, but that's the point being it's a you said he scored a lot of touchdowns. Those are typically unpredictable. I don't want to I would argue that with this offense, it's so freaking good. As someone's got to be back in there running the touchdowns in for him. He is the guy. But I love what you said. Achan can come back. I like Jeff Wilson Jr. I thought they were kind of even in terms of how Mike McDaniel viewed them and was planning to deploy them. So I think he'll come on more in weeks ahead. And to your point, he's already limited at practice. So with an ankle injury, apparently. So someone, if you can, I had a conversation where somebody was talking about throwing in him in a really small piece for like Kamara. And it's like these are the types maybe you try and add a little something on top and get a player like that in return. So but that's kind of funny because I'll just keep going if you don't mind. And like I'll say Kamara was kind of my sell. Now that being said, I would take Kamara over Mostert personally,
Me too.
because I did think he would play more and is going to higher likelihood to finish the season and be very productive at a high level. But that being said, I think the past couple of weeks have been a little fluky, and his value is pretty inflated right now. A lot of people talking about him as like a top 3 or 4 running back rest of year, and that makes sense based on how well he's been producing from a fantasy perspective, but it's a lot of dump offs from Carr. I think that is not scalable. It'll change a little bit as the year goes on. I think they'll push the ball downfield a little more as his shoulder injury heals. But and that's the part everybody knows and is talking about. But I think the other part is like Kendre Miller is a talented guy. He has shown flashes. He was dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury. Jamal Williams, they paid. They're going to use him as their goal line guy eventually. It's a bit of a crowded backfield. And I think you'll see his snap share decrease from like this workhorse role that he's in now to more of a bit of a committee, but he's still so productive with his touches that he will be very productive and he'll still have a great season. But if I could trade Kamara now for like again, maybe throw a little piece on top and get one of these league winning guys like AJ Brown or Tyreek Hill, or you just get a really fat haul from them in the form of like multiple very solid players. I wouldn't be opposed to looking into it.
Well, the name value's there, right? Anytime anyone
Right.
sees that Alvin Kamara, they're thinking 2018 elite running back. Now, I'm not saying he's not elite. I think he's a stretch off elite this year. I think, yeah, like a lot of his inflation numbers are in PPR. I mean, I don't know how good this guy is outside PPR. I'm not in a lot of those leagues, but most of his points are coming off dump offs. Right now, the last 4 weeks, he's got 14 targets, 3, 8, and 14. I don't know any running backs in this league averaging 10 targets a game. That's something I don't think is sustainable. And I really don't think that should happen the entire year. I'd be very surprised if we see this guy average 10 targets per game. And those numbers got to come down if the Saints want to be relevant in this football league here, because when you're throwing the ball 14 times to your running back, chances are you're not winning a lot of football games. So um, Kamara, I like him as he's getting a lot of volume. I do think they want to probably see some of these young guys. He's not. I don't think he's going to be there next year. So they got to see what they got. And yeah, I mean, I can see them possibly moving away from him a little bit down later down the year, and that's when you need him most for your playoff run. So why don't you get a haul for him? You got the name value. Let me just put something out there. Like if you had Alvin Kamara, what would be a name? Would you like? Would you decide on somebody like Hawkinson if you needed a tight end? Would you be open to trading for
Ooh.
Hawkinson?
I don't know. I think I want more than that even. I mean, I don't hate Hawkinson. I mean, that role in his offense is crazy right now. They're really leveraging or throwing him the ball like no other. And if you're really tight end needy, that's actually not too crazy. But I just feel like you could really squeeze someone for Kamara right
Like what
now.
if
Uh,
Saint Brown straight up? Would you take it?
yeah. Oh hell yeah. That's what I'm talking about though. And
Like you could pull. I could see
yeah,
that trade going through in a certain league. I can really do. I could see that happening. What about
yeah,
Mark Andrews? Is that
yeah,
the
I would
cutoff at
take
tight
Mark
end?
Andrews. Yeah, I would take Mark Andrews probably. Again, I'm looking at it like if you don't have Kelsey, you're kind of it. I
Yeah.
don't know. That's my thing. Is it's like if I have Laporta or even like Kincaid, I'm like waiting it out a little bit because like I think after Kelsey there is a big drop off. I really like that role that Hawkinson has. I think both the guys you're mentioning are great or whatever, but um
Here's a
yeah,
good
I
one.
don't know.
Here's
Like
a good one. I want to pick your brain on one more. Alvin Kamara or Brees Hall for the rest of the season. PPR.
probably
PPR.
Brees Hall.
Yeah. Okay. That's where I
Probably
lean
Brees
to.
Hall.
Just because the upside, at least, that's just my way of thinking. And I think there's a little more upside with Hall. But I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't hate you if you wanted to go Kamara there. So
Yeah, it's tough. I'll say it out loud. Like this is one of my favorite, very favorite players, and it's more of a. I think he's coming off of such a crazy week. He's actually rocking a question. I mean, it was an illness, so uh, he'll be fine. He's gonna play great. But I just think if you can get an absolute haul for the guy, to your point, I've seen some pretty crazy trades posted for him, where I'm like, really, someone's like
Keenan Allen.
giving up Keenan Allen and then
Yeah.
something on top for him.
Oh,
I
on
was like,
top.
that's
Wow. Yeah. No.
yeah, yeah. So that's where I'm like, man, that's where I goodbye, and I'm almost sending out some feelers because I think he is so likable that like I love him. Everybody who watches him knows he's dynamic. Um, yeah, he's someone I might consider getting rid of if there's an offer I can't refuse. Again, because of some of the things I highlighted, just the fact that they did just invest a third round pick in Kendre, and he doesn't look like he's a total wash. And I think they're going to want to see more from him, and they are going to use Williams. And it's like whenever you have three headed monster, like there is a certain cap to all three of those guys. So did I think I got into my cell? Oh, you did one cell too. Do you
We
have
talked
another?
about
Or
this thing. Um.
anybody else? Or?
I mean, I'm just spitballing here because yeah, I don't think Brian Robinson is sustainable. We he has been playing better. He looks better. but I think a lot of his fantasy production's coming off tight touchdown outings. If you look on the games that he doesn't score a touchdown, he doesn't really succeed for you fantasy wise. Now, um, listen, I'm not riding with him. I think he goes against the Eagles this year. He's this year. I'm sorry, this week, and he was going to be one of my sits this week because I think he's going to absolutely flop on his face if he doesn't find the end zone. So, if you're going to sell
Yeah,
him, I would
good.
sell him now. I wouldn't wait a week because he's probably going to be a lot lower in value after this week. And I don't like to count on a guy that needs to get into the end zone to pay off for you fantasy wise. That's almost a flip of the coin for me. And I rather have some guy that just can do a little bit of everything, catch the ball. Who knows? Maybe one week he can Alvin Kamara, he can catch the ball 10 times, or he can get into the end zone twice, or maybe he can run for 150 yards. I don't see that. He's got a little bit of limitation to his game. Excuse me, to his
Yeah.
game. So I don't think he's. I don't think he's that. I don't think he's built like that. So
I mean, I admitted I was wrong in a sense because through 2 weeks he was absolutely killing it. I mean, he did play the Denver Broncos, so there's something to be said about that after in week 2, and that was his whole season is propped up. Actually, when you look at it, he's still PPR, 12th overall running back on the season. Uh, but again, that's propped up by almost a 30-point game against the Broncos and has failed to score 14 points or more in any of the others. And some of that miserable inefficiency I feared in a lot of those, in 5 out of the 7 games he's played this year, he's averaged less than 3.2 yards per carry. I mean, miserably inefficient. And it could be line, whatever you want to call it. But to your point, he's not a burner. He's not about to bust some 90-yard run by outrunning the defense. Um, I was incredibly low on the guy because I didn't think he was that dynamic. I think he looks a lot better than he did last year, but I don't hate it. I think to your point, that's almost the one tough part of selling him right now is you're looking at what is he going to do? I need a running back. What's he going to do for me this week? And he's probably an easy sit of the week, right? Like if we were doing starts and sits, it's like, yeah, anybody playing the Eagles at running back, I'm good on, So,
I mean,
uh,
let's break this down
but if you
even a
could
little.
get something for him now and get a deal done, I love it. Yes,
He
100%.
doesn't have 100 yards on the year. He's got one game where he's got 2 games where he averaged 4.5. The rest of the ones are 1 point, 2 point. He didn't have like any really great yard per carry. And the one thing that's really stands out is he scored touchdowns in 5 of his 7 games. So if we take that production away, I don't really like what I see all that much with Brian Robinson. So this is definitely a sell high. I mean, we're 7 games in. This guy doesn't have 90 yards and rushing on one game this season. So that just
Yeah,
take it what you
yeah.
will. He's a touchdown dependent running back RB2 for the rest of the year.
I'll say another bonus sell for you guys is like Alexander Madison, Miles Sanders. I don't think Miles Sanders and Najee Harris are probably too far gone to even try and sell. But Madison, I think, like, I know you were high on him.
It's probably
I
going to be
was
hard to
not.
sell him. It's probably going to be hard to sell him after that
Right, but
Cam
I
Akers
think to,
game.
to the wrong or to the right person who hasn't been watching the game, like this is going to become Akers' backfield, I think, sooner rather than later. And in my opinion, it's definitely not what you like. Regardless of my opinion, the shakedown, the way things are shaking out, is not how you wanted it to go if you were someone who drafted him. But to someone who hasn't maybe been carefully paying attention, they might still think he is like a bell cow. He is playing decent amount of snaps. I don't know. He's just not getting a lot of usage. He did have 25 opportunities 2 weeks ago against Chicago, but only 11 fantasy points. Again, miserably inefficient guy. And if you could get something for him, I wouldn't hate that. But I brought him up because they're in the same range of like their projections on Sleeper. I think they're just they're a running back that if you ask me, like people say, oh, you don't need to prioritize the running back position. Just get one of those guys later. It's like if you end up with one of these guys and you're playing against the guy who has Christian McCaffrey or Travis Etienne, like or even Alvin Kamara, right? Like you're about to get fucking smoked. Anyways, not my guys. Never were.
I
and I
wish
will definitely.
I wish it didn't really turn out to what it is. I didn't think Alexander Madison would light the world on fire. I just thought he would listen, I thought we can get some type of stability like what we're seeing with Isaiah Pacheco, 14, 15 points a game, nothing crazy.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
But we're not seeing that, and now we're seeing Cam Akers even taking more like carries than Madison. I believe he outtouched him last game, so that's not really great, and that's not trending well. But just like Johnny said, if you can find the taco of your league that isn't really paying attention, and you want to see if you can potentially get Madison off your board, maybe you can swing something. I mean, I don't. I personally don't think you're going to get much for him because of what happened last game, but again, maybe you can sell it on the fact that they played the 49ers and say it was a tough defense. So,
Yeah. Um, so I think that's really all we had for buys and sells. I think we could talk your ear off all day, right, about players that maybe you should be looking at picking up off waivers. But I think we wanted to stick to guys that are probably on everybody's rosters, but maybe are you can acquire for so maybe you trade some of the guys we said you should sell for some of the guys we said you should buy. So great. I think leagues are won and lost by great trade decisions and these types of moves that you make. You have to be wheeling and dealing. You miss 100% of the offers you don't, or the chances you don't take, right? So take some chances, piss some people off, send them some offers that are clearly in your favor. And start a dialogue. If they don't respond, be like, "Hey, you want to counter me?" Or, I know that probably wasn't perfect, but what can we do? I see you need a quarterback, right? And that'd be my last piece of advice is like target people's weaknesses, right? If you see a QB needy team and you've got a decent QB on your bench that you can afford to get rid of, then target one of their players that you think has some upside and it's make it a win-win. That's how trades get done. That's how you build and strengthen your team. So yeah, John, any closing thoughts around mid-year takeaways, buys and sells, moves to be made for the teams?
oh man, I think you really nailed it. I think you need to target. There's a lot of injuries out there, so people do definitely have holes on their teams, and people do need help. So look at what they need. Don't just be sending them random things that doesn't make sense for them. If they have Patrick Mahomes, they don't need your QB. So make it make sense a little bit. Target their needs because that's how you get trades done. So
Yeah. Well, cool. Always good linking up with you, brother. Blake couldn't be with us today, but if you watch the show, he's sharp guy as well, and he'll probably be on our next episode. So thank you for watching. Please drop a like, a comment, any questions you have, any thoughts, start sit decisions. We can respond to those. But most importantly, please subscribe. We're trying to grow our brand, our following, and that is our easiest way to continue to pump out amazing content to you guys. So thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your football season, and we'll see you on the next episode.
deuces.